We're out of executive session. There was no action taken in executive session.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Manning.
I move that the legal counsel proceed as directed in executive session related to this matter.
Okay, that's the motion on the table. It's been properly second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Smith.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that concludes that matter, and I think the other matter will be at the end of the agenda.
All right, thank you. Next, we have citizens' input for items on the agenda not requiring a public hearing. We have 3 citizens signed up to speak. Oh, hold on. Which one? Okay. All right.
Not requiring.
We have 3 citizens signed up to speak. I have Ms. Helen Taylor Bradley, Ms. Wendy Brawley.
What item?
It's flood.
Good
Yeah,
evening.
and I'm sorry, Ms. Bradley. You have up to 2 minutes to speak. If you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Helen Taylor Bradley, 1916 Martin Luther King Boulevard, Hopkins, South Carolina. I'm coming to just say a little something in reference to the flood strategic planning meeting. What I would like for you all to look at when you have that meeting is that we have been coming with the Hopkins and Lower Richland Citizens United going into the 2nd year. We have asked that you scrap the project. We are asking again that you scrap the project. Reason being now more than ever, because as you well know, we did have flood damage in Lower Richland. But on the route of the flood, we were one of the few people in Richland County that had clean water and working septic tanks. So here again, when you do your flood planning, we ask that you continue to look at our requests to scrap that project. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Next, we have Ms. Wendy Brawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Wendy Brawley. I reside at 217 Sagemont Drive in Hopkins, South Carolina. First, let me begin by doing what my grandmother taught me to do, and that's saying thank you. Some of you know that the Brawleys have had several losses in our immediate family, and several of you made calls, sent emails, and did a lot for our family, and we appreciate that. It just shows that even when we are adversarial, we can be human toward one another. We can respect our differences. The situation with the Lower Richland Sewer Project and the flooding that happened in Lower Richland, I think is one that really deserves your attention. As Ms. Taylor Bradley mentioned, there was a significant amount of damage done in Lower Richland, but yet still septic tanks worked, water was clean. One of the few places in Richland County where that was the case. We have been making this case for a very, very long time. And the human thing we think for you to do is to really listen to our concerns and to really not move forward with this project. You've delayed it a number of times. I would imagine asking people to sign up, and they haven't, because we really don't need this. And many of the people who will be impacted by what you do, even if the tap-ons are free, will be the next generation. And we care about that next generation because they're our children and our grandchildren. So please consider that when you make your decisions about moving forward with this project. And if I may say one thing else as I talk about the flood, this idea about having contractors being paid millions of dollars to organize and manage relief efforts, that is a waste of money. And if the county has that kind of money, put it in the hands of the people who lost everything. There are many people who lost everything. And why are we paying or even considering paying contractors when we could be actually providing real relief to citizens? So I'm asking that you use that same amount of humanity that you used when we were in a crisis, because for many people, they are still in a crisis. And we need your thinking caps on, and we need your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brawley. Next, we have Ms. Sabrina Todd.
I'm Sabrina Todd. I live at 1312 Glen Haven Drive. Our house has been deemed substantially damaged. We are not allowed to repair our home unless we elevate it. Otherwise, we need to tear it down. We are struggling to get accurate, consistent information from Richland County. I appreciate all the assistance that we've had, the support we've had from Councilman Pierce. And at the Gills Creek Watershed meeting recently, the association meeting recently, both Mr. Pierce and Mr. Rose attended and had nice comments, and we appreciate that. We're trying to figure out what happens with our property. We don't know what to do, what path to take, because we don't know what happens to our house in the end. And we ask you to take it seriously, to educate yourselves on what you need to know about this very difficult and cumbersome process, and to give us some idea of what direction the county council is headed in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Next, we have Ms. Rachel Larrett. Larrett, okay.
I'm Rachel Larrett, and I live at 125 Whispering Pine Circle. I'm actually a neighbor of Sabrina's, and I'm also representing the South Beltline Gills Creek Volunteer Group, where we have between 50 and 60 homes and apartments that are substantially damaged. People have nowhere to live and don't know where to go. And expanding on what Sabrina was saying, we need information, because we've been told at a meeting last night with Representative Kirkman Finley that it can be 12 to 18 months before any kind of county determination is made. We're paying our mortgages. We're all living in rental homes or with friends or family. We can't keep that up for 12 to 18 months. And we don't know what's happening because our homes are literally rotting as the days go by. We've gone into homes that were demoed and done by all the volunteer work, and just a couple weeks later going, okay, this part of the house we thought we can save, we no longer can, because you can't get permits to do anything, you can't get any work done because it's such a long process, but we don't even know where to begin. So we really, really need the council to come together and say, this is the plan, this is what we're doing. Yes, you can rebuild, no, you can't, and try and figure out so we can either move on and go somewhere else or try and save our homes, because right now, half of our neighborhood is gone. It's boarded up. People are breaking in every single day. Every morning I have to go close doors. Every night before I leave, I close them again. I have 80-year-old women who live, no kids, no support, nothing, and the last little bits of things they have in their home, somebody's just stealing. So we need help so badly, and I can't stress it enough. But thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Larrett.
Mr. Chair. Okay.
Mr. Rose.
Mr. McDonald, could the council, maybe at our next available time, can we be briefed on that issue?
Sir, Mr. Rose. In fact, the upcoming session that we have on the whole flood event and the recovery and the emergency response efforts will cover that. Will cover FEMA requirements, FEMA guidelines, FEMA buyouts for the future, and so the whole gamut. We intend to cover with you when we meet. I believe it's on Monday of next week.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Malinowski.
Yeah, and I guess you'll cover this also, Mr. McDonald, but I didn't realize that it was the county that decided if somebody could or couldn't rebuild. I thought that was FEMA and DHEC.
Mr. Malinowski, it's really it's both play a part. The county has codes that regulate building and construction in floodplains and in floodways. Those codes are governed on a larger scale by FEMA regulations. So both county and FEMA, the federal government, play a role in that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Malinowski. That concludes our citizens' input. Next, we have the report of the county.
Mr. Chairman, point of personal privilege.
Mr. Pierce.
Judge Strickland is here with us tonight, and he rarely visits us, and I'd like to recognize him. Welcome.
Welcome, Judge. Next, we have the report of the county administrator, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of council. Just a couple of brief items. I want to introduce you to a couple of new employees, one of which one of whom you know and have known for years, and the other you may not know quite so well. If I could get Liz McDonald to stand up. I think you all know Liz or Miss McDonald, no relation to me. But Liz has been in
She'll
the...
stop calling you cousin now, won't you?
No, she's not anything like that. We just happen to have the same last name. Liz, of course, has been in the assessor's office for about 16 years and has worked her way up during that time from where she started as an appraiser 1 up to the highest level of appraiser. She did that very quickly in 6 years' time, and since then has been a deputy assessor for that office for 10 years. She has been sort of the second in command under John Cloyd, who left fairly recently, and I am happy to say that after probably longer than it should have taken us to make the decision, we have now promoted Liz to assessor, and I wanted to make the council aware of that, and please join me in congratulating Liz on a very well-deserved promotion for the work that she has done. Thank you, Liz.
Before we go, in that regard, now she's on board, we're going to need her at that meeting on Monday.
Yes.
Yeah.
She would have been there anyway.
Okay.
But yes,
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yes, the assessment.
Okay.
The
One of the questions we're having out in the field is the assessment of property and the
Yes.
value, the devaluing of property, and it's going to be a huge issue.
Exactly, and yes, we already have.
Earn her stripes real quick.
Yeah, and I will say too, and I did mention this before, but Liz really took a stance during the flood response, and I think she and her staff were out the week right after the flood event itself, beginning to assess properties, assess damage. So she really stepped up, and so did her staff, and they were part of that initial flood of response, emergency response from the county. And again, I can't thank her enough for what she's done and for what she's done for that office as well. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I want to introduce to you Jeff Rubel. Some of you may know Jeff as well. Some of you may not. Jeff, if you would stand up. Jeff has been appointed, in fact, he started yesterday, so he is fresh on the job as our Economic Development Director. He attended the Economic Development Committee meeting earlier today and hit the ground running without any issues or problems whatsoever. So Jeff comes to us from the SC Power team, if you're familiar with that. It's the statewide economic development engine for South Carolina. He was there for several years as a senior vice president for global business development. Prior to that, Jeff worked, and many of you may know Jeff who have been around for a while. Many of you may know Jeff from working with the Central SC Alliance, who we are contracted with to do some of our economic development recruitment. And at the time Jeff was there back between 1994 and 2006, the Alliance actually was our economic development department because we didn't have an internal department at that time. So Jeff has a lot of experience with Richland County, although not working directly for the county, but working with the county through the Central Alliance back during that 12-year period. So again, Jeff brings a tremendous amount of experience to our economic development effort. He is well respected, highly respected throughout the economic development industry. And again, I think we're fortunate to have Jeff finally as part of our own direct team. And again, please join me in welcoming Jeff to the Richland County team. And finally, Mr. Chairman, with good news, there comes bad news too. Today is Mr. Hammett's, and I know you all know Sparty Hammett, but this is his last full county council meeting of his career with Richland County. He still has a few days left with us, and we're still trying to get as much out of him as we can. But
Milk him.
we are. I've already stretched 2 months out of him, Ms. Dickerson. So I think he was planning to leave back in September in the beginning. But this is Mr. Hammett's last full council meeting. He will be with us next week, and then after that, he is on to bigger and better things. So I know we're all going to miss Mr. Hammett. I know I'm certainly going to miss him. I rely on him tremendously, and he has done a great job with the areas that he's been responsible for, planning, public works, and I think you've all seen tremendous improvements in those areas since Mr. Hammett took over those functions. So, again, it's a sad day, but we have to let him go. So I know we'll miss him. Thank you, Sparty.
Yeah. Thank you, Sparty.
All you do.
And that completes my report, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you.
Matt Donald, I have a question. I know you said it's Mr. Hammett's last week. Did you consider the 2 weeks we had the flood to backdate his exit contract to make up for county time? Just a question.
Ms. Dixon, I have negotiated with Mr. Hammett in every way that I can to keep him. Like I said, he was originally planning to leave in September, and I've kept him now through the end of November. So I think I've probably got him about as much out of him as I can. But I'll keep trying.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Next, we have the report of the Clerk of Council, Ms. McDaniel.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of council. I wanted to remind you all about our strategic planning meeting that's going to take place on Monday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. We ask for full council participation. Also, just reminding you that we have a few modified dates for council meetings in December. We will publish a regular session council meeting for the December 1st meeting on the 23rd. So if you have any, the 25th, if you have any items, we ask that you get those to us or motions by 10 a.m. on Wednesday, since the county is closed on Thursday and Friday. And then, of course, we'll meet on the 1st, 8th, and 15th of December.
Okay.
Where are we going to have the planning? Upstairs?
Yes, sir, in the conference room. Yes, sir.
All right.
And that concludes my report, sir.
Thank you, Ms. McDaniels. Next, we have the report of the chair. We have a presentation by Vulcan Materials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, council members. My name's Elliot Botsis. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of Vulcan Materials for Vulcan Materials South Carolina operations. I'd also like to introduce Jimmy Fleming, our Vice President of Human Resources, Brent Connolly, Operations Manager, and Darla Oldham, who's our Office Administrator at our Columbia Quarry, are here today. I'm here today to first say thank you to the council for working with Vulcan at our Dreyfus Quarry. And second, to celebrate a public sector, private sector success between Richland County Landfill and Vulcan. Rudy Curtis is here, as y'all know. He led Richland County on that project and had great leadership, and we appreciate the working relationship that we have with Rudy and his team as well. As you recall, we had a luncheon planned at the landfill and the quarry on October 6th. However, due to the devastating flood we're all familiar with, it was canceled. Since that time, everyone I know has been extremely busy, so we wanted to come to y'all and with our original message, which is the public-private partnership between Richland County and Vulcan Materials was a huge success. I think it's a given that landfills normally need dirt and quarries normally have more than we want. Having them located next to each other creates a symbiotic relationship that benefits both and ultimately benefits the citizens of Richland County. Over the last 2 years, Vulcan has moved and placed 3 million tons of material, overburden material, at the Richland County landfill. It is estimated that this saved the county approximately $6.5 million. I think that's a significant figure worth celebrating. But instead of having a lunch overlooking the landfill and the quarry, we wanted to give you the commemorative items that we place, a hard hat and then this plaque. To commemorate the public and private cooperation between Richland County and Vulcan Materials Company. We are going to have a lunch, and you will be invited, and we are going to feed the employees of the landfill and the quarry that really made this relationship work so well. Mr. Chairman and Council, given what we've all gone through in the last 5 weeks, we would also like to present a $5,000 check to the Richland County Salvation Army. Major Roger Colson is here to accept that check. On behalf of Vulcan Materials, I would like to say we are proud to be a part of Richland County. 2 of our 11 quarries in South Carolina are in Richland County. I'm proud of the work in which our employees are involved in the communities where we are located. And I'm particularly proud that Richland County has always been there to work with us. Thank you.
They want the hard hats.
You want a picture?
Yes.
All council can put on hard hats.
Mess up my hair. I'm gonna mess up my hair.
Thank you for your appreciative partnership. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, sir. We just want to thank Vulcan again for their partnership and also the fact that they see that in the face of disaster that they made that contribution to those individuals that were affected. We want to thank you again for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll have the second reading items. Item number 12, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2015-16 Hospitality Fund annual budget to appropriate $75,000 of Hospitality Fund balance to provide funding for the famously hot new year.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Got a motion for approval. It's been properly second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by raising your hand.
In favor, Dixon, Jackson, Livingston, Dickerson, Washington, Manning, Jeter.
All opposed?
Opposed, Malinowski, Rose, Pierce, Rush.
That motion carries. Item 13, an ordinance to amend the agreement for designation of the I-77 Corridor Regional Industrial Park dated April 15, 2003, by and between Fairfield and Richland County so as to enlarge the park. Civil Service Group, Inc. Chair, entertain a motion.
Move for approval, Mr.
Got a motion for approval.
Second.
It's been properly second. All in favor of that, any discussion? Mr. Manning, I'm sorry, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question in reading through this. Everything was within the city as far as the rehabilitation of their corporate headquarters and the 43 new jobs. I'm wondering why, I guess we're approving this. What is Richland, what are the benefits to Richland County for this when it's within the city?
Mr. Malinowski.
Mr. Livingston can explain that being
In order for them
easy.
to be included in the industrial park, the county has to approve that.
Okay, all right, I got you. Thank you.
All right, any more discussion, Mr. Manning?
Just wondering if Mr. Rubble wanted to say anything about that.
Mr. Rowe.
I think you put him on the spot, Mr. Manning.
I'm ready to move forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manning. Okay, I got a motion for approval. It's been properly second. All in favor of that motion signify by raising your hand.
In favor, Dixon, Malinowski, Rose, Jackson, Pierce, Rush, Livingston, Dickerson, Washington, Manning, Jeter.
All opposed, like sign. That motion carries. Next, we have the report of the Development and Service Committee. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 14, accept the road and storm draining as is in Hunters Run subdivision, Phase 1, in the county's inventory for ownership and maintenance. The committee recommends that the council approve the request to accept the roads and storm drainage as is in the Hunters Run subdivision, Phase 1, into the county's inventory of ownership and maintenance, contingency upon the bond on the Hunters Run subdivision being satisfied.
You heard the committee's recommendation. Discussion. Mr. Washington.
Who's staffing this? Hey, does buddy. What's the policy on how long we hold a bond?
There is no policy, and one of the things, Mr. Malinowski's motion is going to be discussed at County Council retreat. There really should be a policy in place that says, that restricts the amount of time a bond can be renewed, because what happens is, we got hit with a Great Recession. We, just like every other jurisdiction, you have a construction bond in place. You decrease the bond once the items are addressed, but what a bond amount that would have been valid 8 years later is not valid, because it might have been a $15,000 bond, and then if you keep renewing it, then of course the road deteriorates, and then also just costs go up over time. So there is no policy in place. That will be one of the things discussed at County Council retreat.
Yeah, I remember this conversation some time ago, and somebody's going to have to refresh my memory. We had talked about, because this was similar that came in front of us, that we were going to put a 5-year bond on some of these developments. So that never materialized to this point.
There was there was never, to my knowledge, a discussion of putting a time limit in place.
All right, did the developer get approval from you all to do any repairs?
Yes, the original developer.
The developer who brought it out of foreclosure.
Oh, yeah. New owner actually did some repairs to the roads. He wasn't legally responsible to do any repairs, but he
did. Did he get
did.
approval from the county that he was going to make those repairs?
Yes, yes.
So the road is already in our inventory?
No, that's what the request was, to accept the roads into our inventory. The road still needs some additional repairs, but this is unique in that with some of the other situations, we've had situations where bonds have lapsed. In this situation, the original developer actually maintained the bond that's in place. The original developer has now deceased, but the bond has been maintained and in place. So you've got the original developer actually doing the right thing, and then you've got the new owner actually coming in, and although he wasn't legally responsible, actually doing some repairs. So this is different, and that's why
What I'm
we,
concerned about is the bond. You took
Yes.
it out in 2007 for over $1 million.
right.
But then you reduced it down only 100 and something thousand.
Right, and that's really a common, every jurisdiction I've seen actually does that. You go in for the original construction cost, and then you reduce the amount down once the road itself was pretty much completed at that time. So that's why it was taken down. There was only, you get an engineer's estimate for the remaining cost, and then staff actually verify that estimate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Mr. Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Built to county standards, what's the life of the road?
The average payment life would be 10 to 15 years.
10 to 15? Okay, thank you.
You done, Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any more discussion? The committee's recommendation was for approval. All in favor of that recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
on this
Dickerson.
item, will we be able to do a reconsideration? Because I think it is imperative that the developer go forward, and I think after meeting with them for about a couple hours last week, I'd like to do a motion to reconsider this item.
I got a motion for
Second.
reconsideration. It's been properly second. Discussion.
Yeah,
All-
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
But that's contingent on the bond being
Satisfied.
satisfied? Thanks.
Favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion fails.
That much of the field.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Next, we have the report of the Administration and Finance Committee, Mr. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 15 is the creation of 3 new CASA casework positions. If you folks will recall, the original motion that came out of the committee was to refer this item to the council's FY17 budgetary process, and subsequent to that, additional information came to light stressing the rather imperative nature of getting some assistance to CASA. Their caseload has significantly increased. Ms. Green is having to pull supervisory personnel and put them in the field, which has stressed their abilities beyond their ability to do the work properly. The issue, though, was to how to come up with a funding for that. After talking with Mr. Harley and Ms. Green, CASA does have a grant. We can actually, in effect, borrow money from that grant and fund 2 of the 3 positions now, get her some relief, and then deal with it at our budget as we prepare the budget for FY17. So we would not have to go use any fund balance. It would be money that's available, although we would need to replenish this money as part of the FY17 budget. Since I'm not sure, I guess the original motion was to refer this to the budget. That was the motion from the committee. So I would like to make a substitute motion that we fund 2 of the 3 CASA positions utilizing money from the grant, from a grant which
I second that motion,
Ms. Green has.
Mr.
Okay.
Ms. Green feels like the 2 positions would satisfy her and hold her not. She would like to have 3, but two would get her out of the hole. Nod your head, please. Okay. All right.
Okay, so the motion out of committee was to
The original
send it to the
motion
budget.
was to refer this issue to the budget.
Yep. And
I'm
then you
making
would-
a substitute motion.
No, it was referred to the retreat.
Yeah, I'm sorry, to the budget retreat.
Yeah.
Okay. And the substitute motion is to use the grant funds to fund those
Fund 2
positions.
of the 3 positions.
And it's been properly seconded by Ms. Dickerson. Discussion, Mr. Malinowski, Mr. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have any other avenues for funding been explored? I'm just trying to find out if there's somewhere else that we can try to get funds. Be it the state, other than the grant, you know, be it.
Mr. Harley,
Mr. Harley, if you could state your name and position, please.
Warren Harley, Assistant County Administrator. Mr. Malinowski, that's exactly what we did. We had some conversations with Ms. Green and talked about available resources that she might be able to use in the interim, and that's where we identified some available grant funds that could be used for this purpose to get us from here to the end of the budget year at least. And then, of course, throughout the budget process, we'll identify more permanent funding.
Okay, I mean, I'd like you not to wait till the budget process, but start now and continue to try to look for them.
Certainly.
the other option, Mr. Malinowski, that I brought up and had Mr. Harley explore was to take an unfunded position, an unfilled position that was funded, utilize that money. The problem is that the positions that I wanted to use, we have earmarked for using for a different program, so that didn't work out. So, so yes, I think every avenue, and if you recall, we deferred this item so we could look at all these other avenues.
That was for clarification. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. You done, Mr. Malinowski?
Yes,
Thank you. Mr. Washington.
Mr. Harley, in your notes, you said that in the fiscal year 15 budget, we did allocate positions.
Not this current budget, but the budget before last, we did fund 3 positions for CASA.
So you filled those positions?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Mr. Livingston.
As it relates to the grant, if we do these 2 positions now, that means that we're automatically committing to those 2 positions for the next fiscal year? Because you're not hiring the folks and saying I'm only hiring you for a year, right?
The grant doesn't require, Mr. Livingston, that we pick up positions. That would always, as with any other grant, except for those that are stated at the beginning before you receive them, council's discretion to do that. So this grant is, this grant does not require that.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there somebody addressing the issues as to why the case loads are growing to create this demand on our budget?
Mr. Manning, that's a question I think I may defer to Ms. Green. I'm not.
Ms. Green, if you come forward and state your name and position, please.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Page Green, and I'm the director for Richland County CASA. I truly believe I've been at CASA for going on 13 years, and I have just never seen the surge of children entering foster care and children whose interests are before the court as we have them today. There's a lot of dynamics that have gone on with the Department of Social Services that I think we're all have heard. And there's a new direction, a new administration. In years past, we went through an administration that the push was to get children out of care. So the caseloads dropped. But as what we have seen is the more and more children are coming in, they are staying longer than ever in the tenure that, as far as our data goes back. On any given day, on any given month, we were serving on average 500 children. Today, we are serving almost 900 children. There is also a real push with the Department of Social Services to bring cases before the court for children who aren't in foster care. So that is just every day we're getting more and more. So the Department of Social Services also created hubs, what they call intake hubs, taking that referral when you call in for a child abuse referral that would typically went to the county office. But now they've created these intake hubs. And so really, I think a lot of folks in this child welfare business feel that has contributed to a rise in the numbers.
Stay on the floor, Mr. Manning.
Does CASA receive any state funding?
No, we don't receive state funding. We have we have an agreement, an MOU between the county and South Carolina Department of Social Services to get reimbursement from federal 4E funds, but no state dollars.
Okay. What's been the level of increase of those funds?
There is no increase in that. It's strictly a formula, and it is based upon the budget, our personnel budget. And it's fairly simple. Basically, whatever my personnel budget is, that is reduced by 50%. And then of that number, we are entitled to ask for reimbursement for 75% of that from federal 4E funds for training dollars.
For training dollars?
Correct.
And I may just keep it until the children are served in the county and not just by us. But you take the floor away from me.
All right,
whenever
thank you,
you'd
Mr.
like to,
Mann.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Dixon?
Oh, Ms. Page, my question to you, with the closing of foster homes, how will that affect CASA?
Well, CASA has been impacted by that significantly already. We have probably close to 200 children today, Richland County children, who are placed outside of this county. Our children are placed all over the state, Beaufort, Charleston, Rock Hill, and we have to see these children each month. So we are visiting almost 900 children every month.
How many children are placed outside of the state of South Carolina?
Out-of-state children, we don't really have to. We can get a court order that we can do a telephone contact, so we don't have to see out-of-state children.
Okay, but we do have children out of the state.
We have around 10, 15.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Ms. Dickerson?
Thank you
I
so
got it.
very much.
I got it. Oh.
Ms. Page, I had the privilege, as well as many of us, to travel with you this past summer and see the dynamics that went on in CASA, and I learned so very much. So are you saying that a lot of the overflow that you're seeing, is that an overflow from DSS that is flowing into your system?
Yes, ma'am. All of our cases are DSS cases. So they too have seen the increase, and I guess we hear just about every day in the media of the need for additional workers. That impacts our work just as equal.
So with that being said, if they are flowing, if there's an overflow out of DSS into your system, is there any way you think at some point in the future you'll be able to kind of measure that so that there can be some kind of a reimbursement, or the funds, just because they're not able to take them, I'm for paying for the kids, but I do think that they need to probably get involved, DSS that is, with some dollars. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yeah,
Ms. Dickerson, thank you, Ms. Dickerson.
you
Mr.
pursue
Washington?
that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Washington?
Probably have already.
You said that the training, the reimbursement from federal dollars are only for training?
No, sir. No, sir. What that means is that we can only ask for reimbursement for activities that the CASA personnel staff spend in training.
So nothing for operations?
Nothing.
Is that a federal mandate?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Mr. Jackson?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. McDonald, our local government fund, if we're getting what we're supposed to get from our state legislators, would that be of any help in funding any of these programs?
Absolutely, Mr. Jackson, without question. If we were getting the fully funded amount of our local government fund, many of these kinds of issues that we are bringing to council, we would not be.
And it's important for us to again remind our legislators the importance of fully funding the local government fund, because when they refuse to do their part and we are funding programs that affect the citizens of Richland County, the problem is that the county has to find some way to handle these funds. And I see where the state has an excess of over $1 billion to spend, but yet they still fail to fund the local government fund, and I have a problem with that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Manning.
I'd like to thank my colleague, Mr. Jackson, for those comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manning.
Welcome, sir.
The motion on the table, the substitute motion on the table is to fund the physicians out of grant dollars. All in favor of that motion signify by raising your hand.
In favor: Dixon, Malinowski, Rose, Jackson, Pierce, Rush, Livingston, Dickerson, Washington, Manning, Jeter.
All opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I move for reconsideration.
I got a motion for reconsideration. It's been properly second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. All opposed?
Nay.
That motion fails. Thank you, Mr. Manning. Mr. Pierce.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Next, we have the report of the Economic Development Committee. Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Chair, item 16A is an ordinance authorizing execution and delivery of an infrastructure credit agreement between Richland County and what's referred to as Project VA. Richland County is in the process of negotiating with this company, and what the committee is recommending is that we move forward with first reading, and more details will follow for second reading. The committee's recommendation for approval.
Okay, you heard the committee's recommendation for approval. Discussion. All in favor of that recommendation signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Chair, item 16B, Economic Development Set-Aside Grant from the South Carolina Department of Commerce. This is a pass-through grant from the South Carolina Department of Commerce on behalf of General Information Services Incorporated, which announced 91 jobs yesterday. There's no local match for this, so we're just accepting money from the Department of Commerce.
All right.
Committee recommendations for approval.
Got it. You heard the committee's recommendation for approval. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chair, item 16C, FY16 State Appropriation Act for Richland County Economic Development. Richland County received funding of $100,000 from the state of South Carolina. This is a pass-through grant to the Midlands Development Corporation to alleviate career education and economic barriers in the lower Richland community and surrounding areas. The committee's recommendations for approval.
You heard the committee's recommendation for approval. Discussion. Mr. Malinowski.
I didn't see it in our agenda, and maybe I missed it, but where is that Midlands Development Corporation located?
Where's physical house?
Where are they located?
I know it's in Lower Richland area, but I don't know where it's physical house.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's in the county somewhere, right?
It's in the county, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any more?
Move the county line.
North Carolina.
Any more discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Chair, item 16D, reference Fairmount Health JETA bond issuance. Fairmount Health is seeking to have the JETA issuance a bond to provide funds for Fairmount to purchase Toomey Healthcare System in Sumter for $120 million and to finance $120 million in existing debt. Because JETA is a issue of the bonds, Richland County is required to hold a public hearing reference this matter. So it is recommended that we defer this matter and not take it up until after that public hearing takes place, to refer to our next regular scheduled council meeting. So the committee's recommendation is now to refer that to the next council meeting. So it will take place after the required public hearing.
That's a substitute motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Second.
You heard motion for deferral. It's been properly second. Deferral is non-debatable. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Chair, I think that completes the report of the Economic Development Committee.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Next, we'll have the report of the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee. Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Chair, reference item 17A, Bluff Road Widening Project, on-call engineering team service agreement. Included in your agenda is a service agreement for one of the on-call engineering team, Parish and Partners, to design the Bluff Road widening project, included in the Penny Transportation Program. This service agreement would total $1,376,706, which includes a 10% contingency. It also includes an 82% SLBE participation and a 22% DBE participation, as evident on page 110 in your packet. The committee's recommendation is for approval.
You heard the committee's recommendation for approval. Discussion, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item on page 106 of our agenda where it says services not provided by the consultant. How do they get done then? Is that something absorbed by Richland County?
Rob Perry, Transportation Director. You said 106, Mr. Malinowski?
Yes, sir. There's a list of several bullet points that say services not provided by the consultant.
Yes, that's correct. These things either be done by the program development team or Richland County staff. So that's why we tried to separate out the things that we would be doing.
Okay, if you look at the second bullet point where it says lighting plans, and then go to page 104, under task 15, lighting feasibility study, it says that the consultant will inventory lighting along the project length. So are these two different things? It seems like that's something to do with lighting, but here they're saying they're not responsible.
Well, we want them to research the feasibility of it and come back, but not do the full plan, because that's something we haven't decided whether we're going to put lights up within the projects. We don't want to pay them to design a section of lights for a whole widening project. We want them to just kind of help lead us to make a good informed decision of whether to put lights on the project.
Okay, and on page 109, you've got all these different roads with these footages in there. What is that for?
109, the red boxed in area.
Yeah, the
that's the subsurface utilities quantities to show that we're going to try and locate the utilities in the area, and the box out show the intersecting roads that we need to go, not just on Bluff Road, but we need to go back on some of the crossing roads as well to kind of chase those utilities to find out not just on the road but where they go for a few hundred feet.
Yeah, I mean, a few hundred, you got 1,000 feet on this one and 800 feet on another. I mean, just seems like that's going way beyond the actual main project corridor that's here.
Well, again, we're going to do the studies as far as we need to off of the widening project to make sure that whatever we design for the widening doesn't cause problems down the crossing roads.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Mr. Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The typicals, are we supposed to choose a typical, or I have several typicals, or 4 different typicals?
That's a good question. The next item, item B, C, and D are to set the typical sections, and we're on the Transportation Committee agenda, and so those will be coming up next.
Oh, that will be next?
Yes, sir.
I saw the typicals. I wasn't sure if I could do it. All right, thank you.
Okay, this item is just for the service agreement. The motion was for approval. Any more discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by raising your hand.
And Malinowski, Rose, Jackson, Pierce, Rush, Dickerson, Washington, Manning.
Opposed? Like sign. That motion carries. Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Chair, items 17, B, C, and D are somewhat related in the sense that they're all, as Mr. Jackson referred to, the proposed typical sections. And to help with that, if you look on page maybe 120, 119 and 20 in your packet, you'll see those are just simple proposed typical sections. And what that is showing is how, we'd like for the road to be laid out. These have gone to public hearings. And this is important because before you actually present a proposal for someone to vet and so forth, you want to make sure you know what you tell them what you want them to do. So that's kind of what this is. So we're not asking anyone to agree to a proposal or anything that particular nature. Just asking you to accept the proposed typical sections. And 17B, reference Atlas Road, committee recommendation was to accept that proposed typical section, as well as C and and D. We can take those one at a time, or we can take them all at one time, whatever
Would you do a
preferred.
motion to do them all at one time?
But the committee recommendation for approval for all,
Okay.
for B, C, and D.
Okay. So let me get a because you just had a motion for B coming out of committee. Let me get a substitute motion for all three of them, folks.
Motion for all items.
All right. I've got a substitute motion.
Second.
It's been properly second to accept items B, C, and D. Any discussion? Mr. Jackson?
Okay, B, C, and D, oh, you said this has to go for public hearing also, right?
But they've already had public input.
They already had public input. Right? So B, C, and D, I'm just trying to find B, C, and D. What does B, C, and D says? Does that have the actual design we'll choose? The alternate-
Yeah, look on page 119 and 20. Yeah.
Yeah, so 119 and 20, I saw several as alternative 1 through 4 on 119. We're going to use all those sections or one of those sections?
So for Atlas Road, it is on page 115. So that is, and it's called Exhibit C. So including your agenda is the executive summary, which summarizes the concept report and the public involvement. And then Exhibit C shows the typical section for Atlas Road. And we have Exhibit C for Bluff Road and for Clemson Road.
And Bluff Road, that's the four such as the typicals, right?
There's only one typical we're recommending, which is page 115, Exhibit C for
115.
Atlas.
For Bluff Road, I'm talking.
And Bluff Road is on page 120, Exhibit C. So they're all Exhibit Cs.
120. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Well, Clemson is on 125, I believe. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking, usually over the years, in DOT road widening, we have dealt with some bike lanes. And I didn't see the bike lanes here, so that's why I was wondering why we wouldn't choose to put a bike lane, because it was one of the typical principle of DOT to put wide lanes in all future widening. So is there a reason why the bike lane is absent?
Well, if you look closely at Exhibit C, there are some bicyclists on those asphalt paths. So those are multi-use paths. That
But
can,
it's with the walkway also, right? So they're riding on the sidewalk.
it's a multi-use path. Sidewalk's 5 feet. These are 10 and 8.
I understand sidewalk is 5 feet and these are 10 feet. My problem and my concern is usually when people walking, right, you have bikers on the same path that people are walking. And a bike can get to some high speeds. I've seen different situations where they're hollering, bikers is coming and you have to move out the way. But we had some design where we had the 4-foot bike lane, then the sidewalk is about 5 feet away from the bike lane, which to me is the most safer, typical. And that's why I was concerned about having bikers and pedestrians walking using the same path.
Oh, I don't disagree. That's why you're right. In the public information meeting for Bluff Road, on the left, we showed alternate 2, 3, and 4 that actually had the 4-foot bike lanes in the sidewalks. And based on the public comments on Bluff Road and then comments from the city and university, the Exhibit C is what we're coming back with.
I understand comments from the public and the city and the university, right? But then from an engineering perspective, and what DOT had done also to sort of separate them, right? I mean, I saw alternate 3, which was separating the bikers from pedestrian, from the walkers, the sidewalk, which is more safe. And from a safety concern, that's why I asked that question. I would support typical C, but if the majority wants bikers and pedestrian mixed together, well, I just have a concern with that, and I really can't support something like that. Thank you.
And coincidentally, on Atlas Road, they wanted it the way you suggested. They wanted the bike lane, the 4-foot bike lane, and then the sidewalk. So it was, depending on the project, the public wanted one thing in one place and something else somewhere else.
Well,
I don't
I'm just
disagree.
separating the bikers from, I'm walking and a biker's coming out to move out the way, even though it's wider, and that's usually a problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jackson. The motion on the table is to accept items, and it's been properly seconded to accept items B, C, and D for approval. All in favor of that motion signify by raising your hand.
In favor: Dixon, Malinowski, Rose, Pierce, Rush, Livingston, Dickerson, Washington, Manning.
All opposed, same sign.
Jackson.
That motion carries.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Livingston.
That completes the report of the Economic Development Committee.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Next, we have citizens' input. Must pertain.
Sorry, Transportation Ad Hoc Committee.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Next, we have citizens' input for items, must pertain to items not on the agenda. All right. I have Ms. Helen Taylor Bradley, Ms. Wendy Brawley, and Ms. Rachel Larrett.
(1916 Martin Luther King Boulevard, Hopkins, South Carolina). Again, on behalf of the Hopkins and Laurelton Citizens United, they wanted me to remind you all that 1,500+ signatures were turned in on a petition to the county, to USDA, and DHEC for you to scrap the project, and they just wanted me to remind you of that tonight. So if you would take that under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Ms. Brawley. Okay, thank you, Ms. Brawley. Ms. Larrett.
Do I have to say my name again?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
Rachel Larrett, 125 Whispering Pines Circle. I've been working with the South Beltline Gills Creek Volunteer Group. I'm one of the people helping run it. And we've been serving residents throughout the entire county who've word of mouth heard about us. My issue is with the Lower Richland Operations Center. We're also sharing a space with them, so we've seen what's coming in and out and what is and isn't being done to help people. And I just wanted to make sure that you would consider the nonprofit organizations that are here doing all the same work for free, because we know it's the right thing to do to help everybody that we can in the county, not just one part of the county, and that there's a lot of resources that aren't being utilized or that are being directed towards groups who aren't doing anything with those resources. So I know if we had some help, we could help even more people. And there's other groups like the Flood Hub with the Palmetto Project that they're also helping everyone that they can, and not just one specific group. So I just wanted to remind you guys about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Larrett. And that concludes our citizens' input. Next, we have other items. Item 19A, state and subrecipient public assistance funding agreement, severe storm and flooding. Mr. McDonald, if you can explain.
Mr. Chairman, that is actually the item that is listed, the second item that was listed for discussion in executive session, so I would recommend deferring that till after executive session.
All right, thank you, Mr. McDonald. And we also have item 19B, Mr. Malinowski, the AG opinion for
Right, thank you, Mr.
rules.
Chair. In June of 2014, the state legislature passed a law that basically said the South Carolina Geodetic Survey could change county boundary lines, the actual physical boundary lines, and that there was nobody could have any say. They would resolve disputes if there were disputes. If you didn't like it, you could appeal, but that appeal comes after the fact, which would cause agencies and citizens alike to have to incur court costs and a lot of time and attorney's fees. But then when you look at Section 7 of South Carolina law, it states that while the General Assembly shall have the power to alter county lines at any time, provided that before any existing county lines are altered, it must first be submitted to the qualified electors of the territory proposed to be altered and pass with a 2/3 majority vote. So therefore, it seems that the law they passed in 2014 is in direct conflict with the original and still on the books Section 7 law. And so in order to find out where we stand, because if this geodetic survey winds up being able to just on their own move county lines, every county out there stands to lose property values at any given time, of which that's where our bonding comes from, as well as our financial income and tax monies. So I'd like to see, our Rules Committee believes that the legal department should request an Attorney General opinion to see if the most recently passed ordinance or law is correct, or if we must do it by the electors in a 2/3 vote. So we're seeking an AG's opinion. And that motion is to get an
Unanimous.
Attorney General opinion from the legal department, not relating to this.
Okay. And you need unanimous consent for that, right?
No.
Okay.
No, just to get it on the agenda.
No, it's on the agenda. For the opinion, we just need a majority, simple majority, okay. All right, okay, that's fine. All in favor of that motion for AG's opinion? Well, it's been, motions on the table, it's been properly second. Discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
That concludes what I have to say, Mr. Chair.
All right. Next, we have executive session. Got a motion for executive session. It's been properly second. Mr. Smith, if you can state what we're going into executive session for, please.
State and subrecipient public assistance funding agreement, that's a contractual matter.
All right. Thank you, Mr. We got a motion on the table. It's been properly second. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries.